Today we're going to talk about my first experiences with the Nikon ZF. Let's get into it. So this is the Nikon ZF. Now, Nikon were kind enough to send this out for review, but there are a couple of things I've got to make you aware of with that. Firstly, this is a biased review. I don't get to keep this camera, and normally this is the bit of the video where everyone says, I'm unbiased, you can trust my opinions. I don't care about any of that. Personally, I enjoy most camera brands. My main camera brands are Fujifilm and Leica. However, when I first started getting paid gigs, it was on a Nikon system. The Nikon D5200 was the first camera I used in a professional scenario, and I used it regularly. It was a fantastic little camera. And while we're on that subject, this is my own Nikon F3. This is what I consider to be the greatest film camera ever made. And realistically, it's the one camera I'll never sell. So you can be damn sure when it comes to talking about the Nikon ZF, I am a little bit biased. I enjoy their cameras. I hope they do well, but I think they make damn good vintage style cameras. Again, this thing is an absolute beaut. So to be clear, Nikon did send me this camera out. I don't get to keep it. I've just got it on loan because I want to try and see if it fits into my system. Now realistically, as I've said previously, every camera is more than good enough. If you don't accept that, I don't really care about your opinion. It's just a matter of fact nowadays. They're all really damn good. Now one of the reasons that I might be looking to put a Nikon ZF into my lineup is because I'm not overly happy with the direction that Fujifilm are going. This is a conversation for another day, frankly, but I still love my X-T4, I still love Fujifilm cameras, and I still think Fujifilm make the best lenses. But we'll come back to that. I don't think Fujifilm's build quality is improving. I would say quite the opposite. And I don't know if they're supporting the photographers that helped support them at the start. Now my issue with Nikon is everyone is asking for a ZF version 2, and I'm pretty sure we'll never see it. I'll touch on this as well. We have had some heritage kind of legacy design cameras from Nikon that involve digital sensors in a film style body. So you have the original Nikon DF, so the digital F camera. You also had the ZFC, and the ZFC also did really well, but it was an APS-C style camera. And then we have this, the Nikon ZF. Now this is a full frame Z internaled camera that is built to a very, very high standard. We've got magnesium top plate with brass dials, a 24 megapixel full frame sensor, and ridiculously fast autofocus. The EVF is nice and bright, and the handling is good overall. There are some caveats in that, and some things that people have quite a lot of issues with. Firstly, I'm going to talk on it, the ergonomics. I have seen reviewers put in huge zoom lens on this camera and complaining that the ergonomics are crap. Look at this camera. There's no grip. There's not meant to be. It's an old style camera. If you want a camera with good ergonomics, go and buy a Z5 II, a Z9, any of the other Z cameras. If you're buying the ZF, which is specifically based on an old school design so that you can hold it with two hands, not with one, and bring it up like this, you are to support the bottom of the camera. This is how you properly hold a vintage camera. Now I appreciate that might not be particularly ergonomic for some people. It just means this camera is not for you. It doesn't mean the ergonomics are crap. It just means it's built how they used to be built. Suck it up, buttercup. You've got 1,000 other cameras that you can choose from. But if you want vintage, this gives you that vintage feel. That's not to say it can't be improved. Prior to this review, I did get the newer ZF grip. And I got the one with the little red stripe because, again, I have a Nikon F3. I'm biased. And this is how the camera looks with the newer grip. Again, it's a much bigger grip in the hand, doesn't add too much bulk, and it does give it the classic red stripe. Again, it's not for everyone. And I'll be honest with you, the grip is not for me. It definitely makes the camera nicer to handle, but I would only be willing to use it if I was going into a paid environment where I might be using the camera for a very long time. Outside of that, for all of my home use, family, travel, I'm going to be using the ZF as is. So again, Are the ergonomics poor? Yes. Have they changed from the F3, the FM2? Not really. You need to hold this kind of camera differently. If you want a more modern feel while retaining the vintage aesthetic but still having a little bit of grip, the Fujifilm series have you covered there with the XT line. Again, this is being shot on an X-T4. So let's move past the grip. Again, this is my first impressions of spending some time with the Nikon ZF. The battery has been pretty fantastic. The autofocus is ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. It feels almost Sony level. Animals, people, doesn't matter. It just does great. Honestly, the 3D tracking is really, really accurate and I really enjoy it. It seems to be fantastic. I'm not going to give you all the specs because there's 1,000,001 videos out there, and if you know this camera, you know about the specs of this camera. All I'll say is it's full frame and it's not much bigger than most APS-C cameras. However, it is a heavy beast, but it's well built. For me, this is a deciding factor. I do like my cameras to be smaller, more portable. And the issue with full frame, and a big issue with Nikon, is the size of lenses. Now at the moment I have this ZF equipped with the 40mm f2 special edition. It's a very pretty lens. We could make a different video about that lens, but if I'm just making it short and sweet, the image quality is fantastic. There's a good amount of subject separation and 3D pop to the images, but the build quality is shoddy at best. It feels like a glorified kit lens, but when I think about it, I would rather have a kit lens that is a prime than a kit lens that is a cheap crap zoom that I will inevitably sell. So I do appreciate the inclusion with the ZF, but I would be looking to improve it. One of the issues is it doesn't have an aperture ring. Now, back to the point before about size. This 40mm lens actually keeps the size of the ZF quite compact, comparable to my X-T4. But that's not the full story with full frame. Full frame lenses are inherently bigger than APS-C lenses. And there's not that many lenses in the Nikon lineup that actually have aperture rings. This is a big bugbear for me. I really like having the aperture triangle there on the camera without having to dive into any menus or control anything by the control wheels. It's a small thing, but I've got to mention it. But that is why I have changed my mind on the ZF a little bit and I've got it in for this loaner period. Previously when I tried it, there were not a lot of options. You could get the 28mm special edition and you could get the 40mm special edition, both plastic fantastics with no aperture lenses. Outside of that, you really didn't have any choices. A couple of years after release, and we've now got access to lenses from Viltrox, from Brighton Star. There's even some very good adapters out there. So there is the Megadap, or Viltrox make one as well, where you can adapt Sony E-mount lenses to the Nikon Z mount. So a good example is you could have Zeiss glass on this Nikon ZF. That's just a glorious combination in my mind, something I would love to try out. There's also a company, I believe it's called Monster Adapter, that allow you to put the original Nikon F screw mount lenses onto the Nikon ZF. All of these with working autofocus. So there's a lot of options there for me to potentially look into, but I wanted to get an idea of how this body handles, feels and performs. I've got to say the image quality is sublime. It's absolutely beautiful, absolutely brilliant, and I have no concerns or qualms about that at all. Again though, I'm not the most fussy. Between 20 and 30 megapixels, that's more than enough for me. This is 24 megapixels, absolute sweet spot, we're good. The images are crisp, sharp, detailed, and the files are really nice to work with in Lightroom, and I do prefer Lightroom. I know there's some people that would edit in other things. For me, I've used Lightroom for years, that's what I like. I've not tested the video yet. The video functions are supposed to be amazing, and again, now Nikon own Red, there are some red LUTs that you could even use. But again, I have no experience with the video yet. I will try and shoot some this week and get back to you on that. But let's go back to the design of the ZF. I like the handling of it. I really like the dials. I like that they're brass and they're very, very clicky dials. Probably the best I've ever used, even potentially surpassing my Leica Q2. But there are some areas of the build quality that are questionable. The tilt-out screen, I personally love a tilt-out screen because I can close it and use the camera without any back screen and just rely on the EVF. I much prefer that. But it doesn't sit flush. Even on my X-T4, which is several years older, the screen sits flush, and I do think that makes a very big difference to the clean lines and look of the camera. The other issue I have regarding the build quality is the bottom plate feels cheap. I don't like the battery door. It feels flimsy and it doesn't automatically open when you open the latch. And I know a lot of people have issue with the dual card slot implementation in the ZF. So what you have is one standard SD card slot, and then you also have a micro SD card slot. Now for me, I don't have an issue with the micro SD card slot because all I will do is leave that card in the camera and use it as an internal reserve. So if I ever forget a memory card, we're good. And this way I'll always have backups of my image files. This is a much better implementation than not having a dual card slot. Hi, like a Q2. And I appreciate that they did have to make some quite severe space savings in this camera because they don't have a grip to put the battery in. So I do understand why they've had to opt for a micro SD card. Again, I don't mind it. Some people do. I don't think everyone's being very logical on this though. I do enjoy that the controls have multiple ways that you can actually use the camera. You can dial everything in manually, which I really appreciate, and you also have a spam dial. So if you put it in shutter priority or aperture priority, for example, it will automatically dictate that over any of your other dials. A lot of people find this very confusing. It's not. If you have it in manual, it will prioritize the manual controls. If you have it in shutter priority, it will prioritize your shutter control. This doesn't seem particularly difficult to get your head around, but again, some people do like to complain. And I am normally one to point out a lot of flaws with a camera, but I don't think this is one. This is kind of a best of both worlds situation. Now, when I first received the camera, it was on firmware 1.0, where the auto ISO was not implemented well. Updated to firmware 3, the auto ISO performs exactly as you would expect. You change the ISO dial to C, and then you can have that specifically as your auto ISO setting. Nice and easy, works as it should, no complaints from me. And it also signifies that Nikon are listening to the client base, and I think that's a really important point because we have had firmware updates on the Nikon ZF that include an auto ISO improvement in the way that it handles. We've also had film grain added to be able to make your own in-camera presets and kind of emulate Fuji's film recipes. So they are listening. They're almost doing Kaizen level approaches that Fujifilm used to do. But again, I'll do a comparison video because this doesn't mean that I don't love my Fujifilm. I just don't love where Fujifilm are going. Now another thing is the IBIS in this camera. It's very, very well implemented. Possibly the best IBIS I've used in a camera. And I've used Lumix cameras, so I know how much people tout on Lumix cameras, but I'm talking about this from a photography first perspective. And I believe it's up to 10 stops of IBIS, and IBIS will shift to correct around your focal point, not just the center of the image. This is the first and only camera that actually does this. This is amazing. This is a feature that should become a standard in every IBIS system going forward. If we see it again, great. If we don't, the ZF has it. And again, I don't think we'll see a ZF2. Another thing to mention, and I've not been able to test yet, but the manual focus in this camera is quite unique. So they've kind of out-Leicered Leica. If you put a manual focus lens on this, you will still get focus peaking like most other mirrorless cameras, but you'll actually get focus confirmation. So if you have eye tracking on, you will see the eye tracking in your manual focus, and it will shift from red to green when your eye is actually in focus. Again, this is a very unique thing specifically to the ZF at the moment. I imagine that this is going to be a feature a lot of companies are going to copy. But right now, a few years on, it's only in the ZF. A lot of people are complaining about the lack of custom buttons in this camera. There's a few. I don't need many. This works for me. It doesn't work for everyone else. I do appreciate that. Again, if you want grip, if you want better spec, if you want more custom buttons, if you want higher resolution, they have other cameras that offer all of these. I want retro. I want simplified. I want fun to use. If it's fun to use, I'll take it with me more often. My gripe about the controls is that from the front, the camera looks brilliant. We have a function button here, which I always use. We have lens release. We have a fantastic top plate. My issue is the back of the camera still looks very much like a digital camera. And I know that sounds like a weird complaint, but there's so many controls still here. Even though people are complaining that there's not enough, they're wrong. But even though people are complaining that there's not enough, it doesn't look as much like a digital camera as, let's say, my Leica Q2. That is very slimmed down, very basic. I much prefer that. But I will say overall, I'm very, very impressed with the camera. It's fun to use. I really like using it. It is a little heavy. I'm not gonna skip over that point, but my F3 is a lot heavy. So realistically, we've got a very well-built camera that has access to an awful lot of lenses, possibly the best manual focus assists that we've ever seen in a camera, and it's not that expensive. I would like to see more of their vintage styled autofocus lenses with aperture rings, the same kind of way that Fuji does, but I'm going to be honest, I don't think we'll see it. I just don't. Again, this is a very niche camera for a very niche crowd. I think it'll do well regardless. That's why they've brought it out in several different colours. But I haven't told you the best bit about this camera, and it's a really stupid thing, but to me, this is very important. You guys know I love tactile dials, okay? And this camera has them. But what it has more than tactile dials, and again, this is the big one for me, is it has one of the best, most satisfying shutter sounds of any camera I've ever used. You hear that? That is amazing. And an exposed one for you guys. One last note I should point out about the build quality, because it is something that I do personally harp on about. It is a weather sealed camera. Now it's not rated like Leica, but it is weather sealed, and that does go a long way to giving me confidence. So it's weather sealed, dual card slots, the best IBIS I've used, a nice big bright viewfinder, vintage looks, vintage handling, the ability to use a span dial but also knock it quickly into auto if you're giving it over to a friend, tactile controls, beautiful shutter sound, access to Nikon Z lenses, Sony E-mount lenses, the original Nikon F lenses. They're onto a winner here. I enjoy this camera. But again, I like Nikon. I want them to succeed. I want all the camera companies to succeed, because then we, the consumers, get more competition. We get more things that we like on an individual basis. But it's nice that they've released something different, if a little bit the same. And I very much enjoy the fact that with the grip on, it would look like my F3 has a big brother. So stay tuned for more Nikon content. I've got the camera for a little while longer. Thank you, Nikon, for sending me this out, because it is a camera that I'm genuinely interested in and it genuinely excites me. But this does not mean that I'm leaving Fujifilm. I still think Fujifilm has the best selection of lenses, and I still very much enjoy how the X-T4 and cameras prior to that handled. But let's see what's next from all the companies. Until then, I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching. If you want to support me, let me know your thoughts down below, and maybe subscribe to this video. I'll see you next time. Peace.